I sold monsters for a living. And I swear on every credit I ever stole politely. The only creature that ever made me afraid was a human who felt sorry for something the rest of the galaxy had abandoned. My name is Torek Van, licensed acquisition broker, market evaluator, and, depending on which court system you ask, professional liar with excellent paperwork. For 12 cycles, I worked the east spine of Caro's Market, a floating trade bazaar bolted to the underside of a dead mining station somewhere past the legal edge of civilized space. If you needed a volcanic hound that could smell fear through steel, I knew a supplier. If you needed a glass serpent trained to guard vaults without blinking for 6 months, I knew a breeder. If you needed a bodyguard with 4 arms, no questions, and a contract that technically did not violate the Orion Labor Accords, I could arrange that before lunch. I had seen war beasts in shock collars, pirate captains sold under false names, royal pets worth more than small moons, and one choir of psychic mushrooms that made 3 customers confess tax crimes just by humming. So understand me when I say this clearly. I was not sentimental. Sentiment got you robbed. Mercy got you stabbed in the invoice. And pity, in Caro's Market, was what poor people called bad math. Then Caleb Walker walked in. Human male, maybe 6 feet tall, maybe 180 pounds, plain brown jacket, dust on his boots, tool bag over one shoulder. No armor, no escort, no visible weapon. Nothing about him looked expensive, dangerous, or important, which meant half the market dismissed him before he had taken 10 steps. Humans had a reputation out there, of course, but reputation is a funny thing. In military reports, they were deathworlders. In border bars, they were trouble with pulse rates. In markets like ours, they were customers who asked too many moral questions and paid in full, which made them annoying but useful. Caleb did not look like trouble that day. He looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from bad coffee, cheap ship air, and a long trip made for reasons nobody else understands. He moved through the crowd slowly, eyes passing over cages, stalls, contract boards, auction lights, and things better left unnamed. Most customers stared at the rare items. Caleb stared at the locks. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the merchandise. Not the prices. The locks. Like he was counting exits in a room that did not know it was already being judged. Then he reached pole 7. Everyone knew pole 7. It stood near the old ventilation fans, under a yellow light that made every species look sick. Chained there was Viola Thorne, though nobody used her name then. Names made property complicated. She sat with her back against the pole, silver gray hair hanging forward, wrists bound in dull black restraints, head lowered like she had run out of reasons to raise it. Above her, bolted to the pole with 2 crooked screws, was the sign that made customers laugh the first day, whisper the second, and avoid that aisle entirely by the 7th. Free. Nobody wants her. Caleb stopped walking. That was all. He did not gasp. He did not curse. He did not perform outrage the way soft-hearted tourists sometimes did before deciding rescue was too expensive. He just stopped. Around him, the market kept breathing its ugly little breath. Vendors shouted prices. Engines coughed. Creatures clicked, hissed, chirped, and bargained. Somewhere, a child-sized drone tried to sell counterfeit navigation charms to a priest. But at pole 7, the air changed. I felt it across my counter. Viola did not move. Caleb read the sign once. Then he looked at her chains, her bare feet on the cold deck, the empty water cup beside her, and finally her face hidden behind that curtain of silver gray hair. I remember thinking, do not do it, human. I remember hoping he would keep walking. Not because I cared what happened to him. I did not. Not then. I wanted him to keep walking because every creature in Caro's Market understood one rule about pole 7. Free did not mean worthless. Free meant somebody else wanted you to make the mistake first. The laugh came first from a Sarthian jewel cutter with too many rings on too many fingers. It was a wet, clicking sound, the kind of laugh people use when they want permission to be cruel in public. Then a dock broker laughed. Then 2 cage inspectors. Then half the aisle joined in, because nothing spreads faster in Caro's Market than cowardice pretending to be humor. Caleb Walker heard them. I know he did. His shoulders shifted slightly. Not tense, not frightened, just aware. That was another thing about humans I never liked. They noticed too much and reacted too little. A Dravik trader leaned over his counter and called out, "Human, that one is not a bargain. She is a disposal problem with hair." More laughter. Someone else said, Take her home, and she will ruin your ship by morning. A third voice shouted, if she is still breathing by dinner, bring her back, and we will all apologize. Nobody meant it. Apologies were not a market currency. Caleb did not answer. He stepped closer to pole 7 and crouched down, careful, slow, leaving space between himself and Viola Thorne as if she were not chain merchandise, but a person who deserved warning before a stranger entered her reach. That made the crowd laugh harder. In Kairos, kindness looked like weakness, and weakness was free entertainment. I left my counter because I wanted a better view, and because if the human actually took her, somebody would need to witness the liability transfer. My assistant, a nervous little blue-skinned accountant named Pell, grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Boss, do not get close." I told him not to be dramatic, which was rich coming from me, because my own feet had already slowed. Viola had been at pole 7 for 9 market days. Before that, she had belonged to a mining captain who returned her without asking for a refund. Before him, a security guild tried to train her as a gate sentry and filed a complaint that made no sense at all. Before them, a noble family from the inner moons bought her for decorative household service, then paid extra to have their name removed from the chain record. 17 owners in total. 17 returns. No confirmed crimes. No listed disease. No visible defect except the one thing nobody could put on a form. Things failed around her. Locks jammed. Lights flickered. Translation implants stuttered. Small machines forgot instructions. The market medics scanned her twice and found nothing except elevated stress markers and an old genetic classification that had been scrubbed so thoroughly the database showed a blank space where her species history should have been. Blank spaces are expensive. Blank spaces mean somebody powerful once paid to make knowledge disappear. Caleb looked up at the sign again, then at the chain collar fixed to the pole. His face did not change much, but his eyes did, and every experienced seller in that aisle saw it. The jokes started dying one by one. Not because Caleb looked angry. Anger is easy. Anger spends itself fast. This was worse. This was assessment. The human was no longer looking at an item. He was looking at a crime scene. I cleared my throat and put on my best professional smile, the one that had survived 3 audits and 1 marriage tribunal. "Sir," I said, keeping my tone light, "she is available as posted. No fee, no warranty, no return privilege, and no responsibility accepted by Caro's market after transfer." Caleb finally looked at me. His eyes were brown, ordinary, and annoyingly steady. "How long has she been here?" he asked. Not how much trouble is she. Not what can she do. Not why is she free. How long? The crowd went quiet enough that I could hear the old ventilation fans ticking overhead. I gave him the safe answer. Long enough. Caleb looked back at Viola. She still had not raised her head. Then he said, "That is not an answer." And for the first time that day, I realized the market had not found a fool. It had found the one kind of customer we were never prepared for. A human who wanted the truth before the price. Caleb Walker did not move like a buyer. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Buyers in Caro's market had patterns. The rich ones circled merchandise with bored faces and expensive gloves. The desperate ones asked too many questions about payment plans. The cruel ones smiled before they spoke. Caleb did none of that. He stayed crouched near Viola Thorne, hands visible, voice low, posture calm, like he was approaching a frightened animal on the side of an American highway instead of a chained alien woman in a station market where compassion usually came with a hidden fee. "You can hear me," he said. Viola did not answer. Her hair covered most of her face, pale silver under the yellow light. I could see one cheek, one narrow shoulder, the edge of her left hand resting against the deck. Her fingers were thin, almost delicate, but not weak. There was stillness in them. Not exhaustion. Not surrender. Stillness like a sealed door. Caleb glanced at the water cup beside her. It was empty except for a gray ring of mineral dust. He picked it up, inspected it, then looked at me. When was she last given water? I almost laughed out of habit, then stopped because his tone was not dramatic enough to mock. It was plain, practical, dangerous in the way simple questions become dangerous when everyone knows the answer is ugly. I said, "She refuses most provisions." That was true enough to survive a legal review. Caleb looked back at Viola. "Did you refuse, or did they stop asking?" The entire aisle seemed to lean away from him. Even Pell made a tiny sound behind me, like a printer realizing it had jammed during tax season. Vaila's fingers twitched once. Just once. Caleb saw it. Of course he saw it. Humans see one leaf move in a forest and start building theories. He reached into his tool bag, and 6 guards shifted at once. Their armor plates clicked. Their stun rods lifted a few inches. Caleb paused, looked at them, then slowly pulled out a sealed plastic water pouch and a plain protein bar wrapped in blue foil. Human supplies. Cheap brand. Shipboard emergency stock. He placed both on the deck, not in her lap, not against her hand, just close enough that she could reach them if she wanted. No pressure. No command. That small courtesy confused the market more than a weapon would have. A customer behind me muttered, "Is he feeding her?" Another whispered, "Maybe humans imprint on damaged things." I wanted to tell them to shut up, but not because I disagreed. Because Caleb was listening, and each insult seemed to settle somewhere behind his eyes without changing his face. Vaila's head tilted a fraction. For the first time, I saw one of her eyes through the fall of silver hair. It was not glowing. It was not monstrous. That would have been easier. It was pale blue, almost colorless, and focused entirely on the water pouch as if she did not trust it to remain real. Caleb slid backward 2 inches, giving her more space. My translator clicked softly as it caught a sound from her throat, too quiet for most species, but just loud enough for the machine to guess at meaning. "Why?" she asked. One word. Thin. Rough. Not grateful. Not hopeful. Suspicious. Caleb answered like the question made perfect sense. Because nobody should have to ask permission to drink. That was when the lights above pole 7 flickered. Not all the market lights. Just the 3 directly over us. They blinked once, then steadied. Every vendor in range stopped pretending not to watch. I felt the skin along my neck tighten. The last time those lights flickered, a register erased 4 days of sales records and blamed a weather event inside a space station. Caleb did not look up. Vaila did. Only slightly. But it was enough for the nearest guard to take 1 full step back. I hated him for that step. Not because it was cowardly. Because it was honest. Caleb noticed the retreat, then noticed how no one else would meet Vaila's eye. He stood slowly, dusted one knee with the side of his hand, and turned toward me. "All right, Torek Van," he said, pronouncing my name correctly, which was rude in its own impressive way. "Tell me what she is accused of." I spread my hands, showing empty palms. Universal language for please do not involve me in whatever moral disaster you are preparing. Accused? Nothing officially. Officially, she is unclaimed transferable property with voluntary release status. Caleb stared at me. She is chained to a pole. I nodded. Yes, that is the transferable part. Somewhere behind him, Vaila touched the water pouch with 2 fingers, like it might vanish if she held it too quickly. Caleb did not turn around. He let her have that private moment. And that, more than the questions, more than the steady eyes, more than the way the guards kept adjusting their grip, told me exactly what kind of human had walked into my market. Not a hero. Heroes are loud and usually broke. Caleb Walker was worse. He was patient. And patient. Humans, I would soon learn, are where bad systems go to die quietly. By then, every vendor within 50 feet had developed a sudden interest in Caleb Walker's choices. They pretended to polish counters, organize tags, adjust inventory screens, and inspect creatures that absolutely did not need inspecting. Nobody wanted to be seen watching Pole 7. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next either. That is the thing about markets like Kairos. We were all cowards, but we were professional cowards, and professional cowards understand the value of information. Caleb stood between me and Vaila Thorne with his tool bag hanging from one shoulder, looking less like a customer and more like a man trying to decide which part of a machine had failed first. I decided to help him make the sensible choice, mostly because sensible choices kept insurance rates low. "Mr. Walker," I said, using the polite form humans liked, "you seem like a practical individual. So let me be practical with you. Walk away." His expression did not change. Why? I looked toward the nearest guards. They looked away. Very reassuring. Because everyone who took her regretted it. Caleb glanced over his shoulder, not directly at Vaila, but toward the space beside her, giving her the dignity of not being discussed like furniture even while standing in the worst furniture store in the galaxy. Regretted how? That was the problem with humans. You gave them a warning, and they treated it like an invitation to request documentation. I lowered my voice. Her first recorded owner was a cargo captain out of Galactic station. Big ship, 12 decks. Good crew. He brought her aboard as indentured maintenance staff. Within 48 hours, every magnetic seal on the lower decks began unlocking at random. Not opening. Unlocking. As if the ship had quietly decided captivity was embarrassing. Caleb blinked once. Mechanical failure? That is what the captain wrote. Then he returned her personally and refused to step within 10 feet of her chain. Caleb looked at the restraints around Vaila's wrists. And the second owner? A private security guild. They wanted someone quiet for observation work. Their training drones lost. Target recognition whenever she entered the room. Not malfunctioned. Lost interest. One drone logged her as empty space. Another identified her as its commanding officer and asked for orders. That got a reaction. Not fear. Not surprise. Caleb's brow tightened. The way mechanics look when a noise in the engine finally starts making sense. And the others? I spread my hands. Homes with doors that opened by themselves. Vaults that would not stay locked. Surveillance recordings that blurred only around her face. A medical scanner that printed one sentence in a dead language and then permanently retired itself. Caleb asked, "What did the sentence say?" I considered lying. I truly did. Lying had carried me through many difficult afternoons. But Vaila's fingers had curled around the water pouch now, and the lights overhead were making a faint sound, not flickering this time, humming. So I told the truth. It translated roughly as, "She is not contained." Caleb turned back toward Vaila. She had not drunk the water yet. She held it in both hands like she was trying to remember what trust felt like. Behind us, the Dravik trader who had joked earlier backed into his own display case with a soft clatter. Caleb heard that too. Of course he did. He looked at the guards, the vendors, the customers pretending to be statues, and then finally at me. If she is so dangerous, why is she still chained here? For one beautiful second, I had no answer. That question had lived in the market for 9 days, hiding under every laugh and every rumor. Why keep a thing you feared? Why display what you wanted gone? Why mark her free and still hope nobody took her? Pell whispered from behind me, "Because the chain is not for her." I wanted to fire him immediately. Caleb's eyes moved to my assistant. Pell turned a shade of blue I had only seen during oxygen audits. "What does that mean?" Caleb asked. I stepped in quickly. "It means my assistant enjoys poetry when stressed." But the damage was done. Caleb had heard the shape of the truth. Vaila slowly raised the water pouch to her lips and drank. A small act. A normal act. Nothing dramatic. Yet every restraint on pole 7 clicked once in perfect unison. Not opened. Not broken. Just clicked, like locks clearing their throats before speaking. The guards lifted their weapons higher. Caleb did not step back. He stepped slightly to the side, placing himself between Vaila and the nearest raised barrel without making a performance of it. Human stupidity, I thought. Human bravery, I corrected a moment later. Then Vaila spoke again, softer than before. "Do not ask them what I am." Caleb looked down at her, calm as a Sunday morning in a small American town. "What should I ask?" Her pale eyes shifted toward me, then toward the market owner's black office window above the aisle. "Ask them who they are hiding me from." The question landed in Caro's market like a dropped wrench in a silent engine room. "Ask them who they are hiding me from." Vaila Thorne said it quietly, but quiet words travel far when everyone is already scared. Caleb Walker looked up at the black office window above the aisle, the one-way glass where market owner Ralvix usually watched disputes become profitable. Ralvix did not come down for small problems. He sent clerks for refunds, guards for theft, lawyers for anything with paperwork. But for Vaila, the window darkened, and every vendor in range suddenly remembered urgent business somewhere else. I tried to step away too. Caleb noticed. Of course he did. "Mr. Van," he said, still polite, still calm, which somehow made it worse. "Who is up there?" I smiled the way professionals smile when standing near a fire and hoping the building belongs to someone else. "Management." Caleb nodded once. "Then I would like to speak with management." Several guards shifted their boots. One of them, a broad-shouldered Quran with polished shoulder plates and the personality of a locked door, said, "Human, market management does not answer customer questions in active transfer zones." Caleb looked at him. "Then I am not asking as a customer." The guard made the mistake of smiling. "Then what are you asking as?" Caleb crouched, picked up his tool bag, and set it on the deck between his boots. Not quickly, not dramatically, just with the patient care of a man who had fixed generators in freezing rain and did not expect machinery to cooperate. Until properly persuaded. As a witness, he said, that word did something strange to the crowd. Buyers understood ownership. Sellers understood contract language. Guards understood force. But witness was a human word in that moment, heavy with courts, churches, small-town juries, body cameras, and mothers asking exactly what happened here. Pell inhaled too sharply behind me. I wanted to cover his mouth. Caleb opened his bag and removed a compact scanner, scratched, patched with silver tape, the kind of civilian tool mechanics used to find pressure leaks and bad wiring on freighters. The Coron guard scoffed. You plan to repair the pole? Caleb did not look at him. Maybe. He ran the scanner along the base where Vaila's chain anchor met the deck plating. The device chirped, then displayed a row of red warning bars. Caleb turned it slightly, frowned, and scanned again. Now that was interesting. Human faces are soft, expressive, practically designed to leak information, but his went still in a way that made my stomach tighten. He had found something. Not Vaila. The pole. He tapped the scanner screen. This anchor is drawing power. My mouth went dry. That is impossible, I said automatically, which is what guilty infrastructure always makes people say. Caleb angled the scanner so I could see. There it was. A thin energy feed running from the pole down into the deck, routed through old market wiring and disguised as a lighting circuit. Not enough power to run a shield. Not enough to hurt anything. Just enough to keep a signal alive. Caleb looked at Vaila. Are they tracking you? She lowered her eyes. Not me. The chain. The nearest guard said, that equipment is market property. Caleb ignored him, which I admired in theory and feared in practice. He opened a side pocket and pulled out a pair of insulated cutters. The guard stepped forward. Human, do not touch that anchor. Caleb paused with the cutters in his hand and finally looked at him. Why? There it was again. That terrible little human question. Why? The guard had no good answer. Orders, he said. Caleb nodded, as if that explained everything and excused nothing. Then he asked the wrong question, the one no customer in. Caro's Market had ever asked because customers wanted ownership, not accountability. What did you do to her? Nobody laughed this time. Above us, the black office window lit from behind, revealing the silhouette of Ralvix himself, tall, thin, and very still. Vaila's hand tightened around the water pouch. The three lights overhead dimmed until the aisle looked like late evening back on some dusty roadside in Kansas. Caleb did not raise his voice. He did not threaten anyone. He simply placed the cutters against the powered line at the base of the pole and said, I am going to disconnect this. If that is a problem, now would be the honest time to explain why. Ralvix's voice came through the market speakers, smooth as oil poured over broken glass. Step away from the asset, Mr. Walker. Caleb looked up at the window. Asset. Vaila flinched at the word, just barely. Caleb saw that too. His thumb tightened on the cutters. In that second, I understood something that my species should have written down centuries earlier. A human does not need to hate you to become dangerous. Sometimes all he needs is to hear you call a person the wrong thing. Caleb Walker cut the line. Not the chain. Not yet. Just the hidden power feed running through the base of pole 7. The little secret wire that had been pretending to be part of the lighting system. The cutters made a small snap, so small most people in the market would have missed it on any normal day. But there are no normal sounds when an entire aisle is holding its breath. The moment the lines separated, every price screen within 30 feet went black. The auction lights froze. A payment terminal chirped once and displayed the word pending in 12 languages. Somewhere behind me, a containment cage began politely asking for a software update. Ralvix's voice dropped from the speakers, no longer smooth, no longer amused. Mr. Walker, that was regulated equipment. Caleb looked at the dead wire, then up at the black office window. Funny place to hide regulated equipment. The Quran guard stepped closer, stun rod lifted but not fired, which told me he was smarter than he looked, or at least more frightened than his armor. Suggested. Vaila had gone perfectly still again, but it was not the same stillness as before. Earlier, she had been a locked door. Now she was a door someone had just stopped holding shut. Caleb seemed to feel it too. He turned slightly, not putting his back fully to the guards, not crowding her either. Vaila, he said, do you want me to remove the restraints? Her head rose a fraction. You should not. That was not no. Humans are very irritating about the difference. Caleb nodded as if she had given him useful technical feedback. Should not because it is dangerous for me, or should not because they told you it is dangerous for everyone. Vaila's pale eyes moved to the broken wire, then to the armed guards, then to the office window. I do not know anymore. That answer should have stopped him. In any reasonable species, uncertainty plus armed security plus a mysterious woman who made machines nervous equals immediate retreat. Caleb only pulled another tool from his bag, a heavier cutter with insulated grips worn smooth from years of honest work. I had seen rich men carry ceremonial blades worth more than my stall. I had seen mercenaries display military-grade plasma tools just to impress scared clients. Caleb's cutter looked like something bought at a hardware store outside Denver and used to repair farm gates. Somehow, that made it worse. Ralvik spoke again. Human, final warning. The asset is under market protection. Caleb did not look up this time. People do not need collars for protection. The first restraint resisted him. I saw the muscles in his forearm tighten. Nothing dramatic, just pressure, steady and controlled. The cutter jaws bit down around the wrist lock. For 1 second, nothing happened. The Koran guard exhaled in relief. Someone in the crowd whispered that human tools were primitive. Then the cutter handle bent. Not the lock, the tool. The metal handle curved under Caleb's grip with a slow, complaining groan. And for the first time all day, Caleb looked genuinely annoyed. Not afraid. Annoyed. Like the universe had handed him a cheap wrench at the worst possible time. He inspected the bent cutter, sighed, and set it down. I would have stopped there. Most species would have stopped there. Caleb reached for the chain itself. Vaila's voice sharpened. Do not. He paused. Her fingers trembled once against the restraint, the only sign that something inside her was fighting to stay buried. Caleb's voice softened. I am not leaving you here. No speech. No oath. No grand heroic nonsense. Just 7 words, delivered with the calm certainty of a man stating the weather. Then he wrapped both hands around the anchor bracket where the chain met the pole. Every guard raised his weapon. Every vendor leaned back. Every sensible instinct in my body begged me to get behind something expensive and insured. Caleb pulled. At first, the bracket held. Then the pole made a sound I had never heard metal make before, a low strained creak that traveled through the deck and up through my bones. Caleb's boots slid half an inch. He adjusted his stance, feet shoulder-width apart, knees bent slightly, like a man moving a refrigerator for a neighbor who promised pizza afterward. The deck plate buckled. The anchor bolts lifted one by one, not flying, not bursting, just surrendering with humiliating little pops. When the last bolt came free, Caleb stumbled back 1 step with the chain anchor in his hands. The market stared. Vaila stared too. Caleb looked at the twisted bracket, then at the broken pole, then gave a small, breathless shrug. Bad installation, he said. And that was the first moment I truly feared him. Because only a human could tear a secret restraint out of a black market station floor and blame the workmanship. The market owner came down at last, which told me the situation had crossed from expensive into personal. Ralviks did not use the stairs. People like Ralviks considered stairs an insult from architecture. A private lift opened beside the office window, and he descended in a column of cold white light. Tall and narrow in a black formal coat that cost more than my stall, his face arranged into the kind of calm expression powerful men wear when everyone else is supposed to panic for them. 2 more guards stepped out behind him, not charging, not shouting, just spreading into position with the practiced patience of professionals who preferred intimidation to paperwork. The crowd parted fast. I parted faster. Caleb Walker stood beside the broken base of pole 7 with the anchor bracket still in one hand, and Vaila Thorne seated behind him, the loose chain resting across the deck like a question nobody wanted answered. Ralviks looked at the torn bolts, then at Caleb, then at me, which I deeply resented because I had not personally invited the human to remodel market property. Mr. Walker, Ralviks said, you have damaged regulated infrastructure, interfered with a listed transfer, and created a public safety concern. Caleb glanced at the bent metal in his hand. You forgot bad customer service. Nobody laughed. I wanted to. I also wanted to live comfortably. Ralviks's eyes narrowed. You are out of your jurisdiction, human. This is not a courthouse in Iowa. This is not a roadside dispute. This is Caro's market. And here, ownership is determined by contract. Caleb nodded toward Vaila without turning his back fully to the guards. Then show me hers. That was the second time silence fell, but this one was different. The first silence had been curiosity. This one had teeth. Ralvik smiled. Her documents are sealed. By whom? By parties with more authority than a cargo mechanic with a sentimental streak. Caleb gave a small nod, like Ralvik's had just confirmed a suspicion instead of winning an argument. So there is a contract. There is a protected record. There is a hidden power line. There are armed guards. And somehow she is free to take. No warranty, no return, no questions. He looked around at the vendors, the customers, the watchers pretending not to be witnesses. That is a lot of effort for trash nobody wants. Ralvik's smile thinned. She is not your concern. Caleb looked at Vaila then, only for a second. She had risen to her knees, one hand against the pole, pale eyes fixed on Ralvik's with an expression I could not read. Fear, maybe. Recognition, definitely. Caleb set the anchor bracket down with a heavy clank. She gets to decide that. The nearest guard lifted his stun rod higher. Vaila's fingers tightened around the loosened chain, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but like someone holding the last proof that yesterday really happened. Ralvik's raised one elegant hand. Easy, he said to his guards, though his eyes never left Caleb. The human is confused. Caleb almost smiled. That was the first time I saw it, the tiny corner of his mouth moving like he had heard something funny at a funeral. No, he said. I was confused when I walked in. I am getting less confused by the minute. Ralvik stepped closer, close enough that most species would have backed away from the height difference, the tailored authority, the guards, the invisible weight of every hidden system behind him. Caleb did not. Ralvik lowered his voice. Walk away, Mr. Walker. I will forgive the damage, clear your docking fees, and add a courtesy credit to your ship account. This can become a story where you made a wise choice. Caleb looked genuinely disappointed. You think this is about money? In Caro's market, that question sounded almost obscene. Ralvik's pleasant mask cracked for half a breath. Then he made the mistake that changed everything. He pointed at Vaila without looking at her and said, It is about returning property to its proper place. Vaila went still. Not quiet. Not frozen. Still, like the entire station had suddenly paused to listen through her skin. The old fans above us slowed. The payment terminals stopped blinking. My own wrist ledger shut itself off and displayed a blank screen. Caleb noticed all of it, but he did not look away from Ralvik's. He stepped back once, not retreating, repositioning, placing himself between Vaila and every raised weapon in the aisle. His voice stayed calm, almost gentle. You keep using that word. Ralvik's frowned. What word? Property, Caleb said. Then Vaila stood. The chain slid from her shoulder and touched the deck with a soft metallic whisper. No explosion. No grand display. Just a woman rising after too many people had decided she should stay low. And every lock in Caro's market clicked at the same time. The sound of every lock in Caro's market clicking at once did not feel like a sound. It felt like judgment learning a language. For one breath, nobody moved. Not Ralvik's. Not the guards. Not the customers pressed against stall counters with their mouths half open and their refund claims forgotten. Even the creatures in the holding pens went silent, which disturbed me more than the locks because animals, unlike merchants, have no reason to pretend. Vaila Thorne stood behind Caleb Walker with the loose chain trailing from one wrist, her silver-gray hair falling around her face, her pale eyes fixed on Ralvik's as if she was not seeing him, but remembering where he belonged in a much older story. The guards aimed their stun rods. Or tried to. The rods rose 6 inches, then stopped, trembling in their hands like they had suddenly become too heavy for courage. One guard muttered a prayer to a maintenance god. Another whispered, Systems failure. That was adorable. We always called miracle systems failure when we wanted to sound educated. Ralvik's took one step back. Small step. Careful step. The kind powerful people take when they do not yet want witnesses to know they are afraid. Vaila looked at the weapons, and the weapons lowered themselves. Not dropped. Lowered. Politely. Like trained dogs remembering the real owner had entered the room. Caleb noticed, of course. His eyes flicked to the rods, then to Vaila, then back to Ralvik's. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. Humans are strange that way. Give one of them proof that reality has just switched sides, and he starts checking whether everyone is all right. Vaila raised her free hand. The chain at her wrist uncoiled link by link and slipped apart without breaking, each piece separating as neatly as if it had never been forged together. Across the aisle, cage latches opened. Contract cuffs released. Storage vaults unlocked. Not the money vaults, I noticed with a shameful little spark of relief. Only the restraints. Only the things made to keep breathing beings where somebody richer wanted them. Ralvix's face had gone pale along the jawline. Vaila, he said, and that was the first honest word he had spoken all day because it was her name. She tilted her head. You remember it. The market speakers crackled. My wrist ledger flashed on by itself, then displayed a symbol I had never seen, a circle cut by 3 vertical lines. Around the aisle, other devices showed the same mark. The old databases were waking up, not from commands, but from recognition. Pell, my doomed little assistant with excellent timing and no survival instinct, whispered, that is pre-concordance military script. I hissed at him to stop knowing things out loud. Too late. Caleb heard. Ralvix heard. Vaila heard. Her eyes shifted to Caleb for the first time with something like apology. I was not sold, she said. My species built guardians for colony gates. Living keys. Living shields. We opened what needed opening and sealed what had to stay closed. Then the wars came, and people decided keys were more useful with chains. Nobody spoke. Even Ralvix had run out of polished lies. Caleb's voice stayed low. Are there more like you? Vaila looked toward the rows of cages, the locked contracts, the frightened faces pretending not to hope. Not anymore, she said. The words were simple. They landed harder than any threat could have. Ralvix recovered enough pride to make his final mistake. He lifted his hand toward a hidden control ring on his finger. I saw the motion. Caleb saw it sooner. But Vaila did not need to look. The ring peeled open like a flower and fell harmlessly into Ralvix's palm, its inner circuitry exposed and dark. Vaila stepped around Caleb then. He did not stop her. He only moved with her, close enough to help if she stumbled, far enough to show the choice was hers. That detail mattered. In a market built on ownership, he made room for permission. Vaila faced Ralvix. You kept the signal alive, she said. Who was following it? Ralvix's mouth opened. No answer came. Above us, the black office window cracked from corner to corner, not shattered, just marked, as if the building itself wanted a record. Vaila lifted her hand again, and every screen in Caro's market filled with sealed contracts, hidden transfers, erased names, and routes marked in red. The crowd saw everything. The sellers, the buyers, the guards, the people who had laughed, the people who had looked away. Caleb stared at the screens, jaw tight, and for the first time that day, I saw anger in him. Not loud, not wild, controlled, human. Vaila looked at him, almost uncertain. I can open all of it, she said. Caleb nodded once. Then open it, he said. Not for me, for them. And every door in the market began to unlock. Every door in Caro's market opened, and for the first time in 12 cycles, the station sounded less like a business and more like a place waking up from a bad dream. Cages unlocked. Contract bands released. Holding rooms slid open. Not one creature rushed forward in chaos the way the guards expected. They stepped out slowly, blinking under the lights, looking at one another as if freedom was a language they had heard as children but forgotten how to speak. That was the part nobody tells correctly when they repeat the story in bars. They make it sound loud. They make it sound like alarms and shouting and heroic music. It was not. It was quiet. Terribly quiet. A dozen guards stood frozen with useless weapons in their hands, and none of them seemed certain who was giving orders anymore. Ralvix looked smaller without locked doors around him. Authority does that. Remove the machinery that enforces it, and sometimes all that remains is a well-dressed coward with excellent posture. Vaila Thorne walked past him without touching him, which somehow humiliated him more than any punishment could have. Caleb Walker followed one step behind her, not leading, not claiming, not rescuing for applause. Just watching the room the way humans do when they are already planning how to get everyone out safely before the next bad idea arrives. He pointed toward the freight corridor. Emergency exits that way, he said. 300 yards, then left at the blue bulkhead. The old dock still has pressure seals, but the west ramp sticks, so lift before you pull. I stared at him. You mapped the exits? Caleb glanced at me like the answer should have been obvious. When I walked in. Of course. Of course the human had entered a criminal market, seen a chained woman, counted the locks, judged the wiring, memorized the exits, and still found time to be polite. Vaila stopped near a row of released workers who were too frightened to move. One was barely 4 feet tall, wrapped in a patched thermal cloak, clutching a broken identification tag. Vaila knelt, placed the tag back in the worker's hand, and said, "Your name is yours." That was when the market changed. Not when the doors opened. Not when the weapons lowered. Then, because every being in that aisle understood what had been taken from them, and what had just been returned. Hell began guiding people toward the corridor, shaking so badly he dropped his ledger twice. I helped him. Do not look so surprised. I was still a businessman. I had simply discovered, under pressure, that I preferred being alive in a universe where Caleb Walker did not look disappointed in me. Ralvix tried one last time to sound important. "You have no idea what follows her," he said. Caleb turned back. "No," he said, "but I know what was holding her." That was enough. Vaila looked at Caleb then, really looked at him, as if she was measuring the shape of a choice she had not been allowed to make in a very long time. "You could leave now," she said. He nodded. "So could you." She looked toward the open dock doors, the frightened freed workers, the dead screens still glowing with exposed records, and then at the chain links scattered at her feet. "I do not know where to go." Caleb picked up his tool bag. "I have a ship with bad coffee, a loud engine, and an empty spare cabin. No ownership. No contract. Just a ride." Viola studied him for a long second. Then she smiled, small and uncertain, like sunrise testing the edge of a storm. "I think I would like that." They left through the West Freight ramp 20 minutes before Concordance inspectors arrived and 40 minutes before Ralvix's private friends realized the tracking signal had gone dark. By then, half the market had already given statements. The records were copied across 6 public networks, and I, Torek Van, had made the first honest report of my career. People still ask me what Vaila was. A weapon, a key, a guardian, the last living lock of a dead civilization. Maybe all of those. But that is not the lesson. The lesson is Caleb Walker saw what the galaxy had labeled useless, dangerous, and unwanted, and he asked one human question. What did you do to her? That question broke Caro's market more completely than Vaila broke the locks. Since that day, I have sold no living thing. I sell ship parts now, mostly legal ones, and when humans enter my shop, I stand up straighter. Not because they are loud, not because they are cruel, because humans are terrifying in the one way our galaxy never prepared for. They look at a chain and do not ask what it costs. They ask who gave anyone the right to lock it.